Thanks for joining us On the Clock with Caroline Clark. I'm Caroline Clark, and today we have an exceptional guest that you're going to be thrilled to hear from. Bonita Stewart has been in digital transformation for a few decades, working in the automotive industry and currently at Google, where she is head of Google's global partnerships team for the largest US publishers across all platforms. She's an extraordinary pioneer in the tech industry. As you know, not a lot of Black women have reached the level she has. In fact, I believe Bonita is the first Black female vice president at Google. Is that right, Bonita?
Yes, that is correct.
So when you hear things like that, when you hear your little bio in a short little clip, which we could have gone on much longer, but that particular element, first Black woman vice president at Google, of all places, how does that feel to you now, especially given where you started out when you were coming out of Howard? Where did you plan to be?
Well, I think I've always, Caroline, it's so great to be here on your show. I think I have always been a pioneer. If I were to give myself a headline, I would say that I've always taken the road less traveled. So in many respects, I have been one of the first, and hopefully not the only. That's where I've spent my time, making sure that I'm not the only one that is represented. Currently, there are more VPs at Google. And as I said, coming out, yes, I probably wouldn't have thought that perhaps I would reach this pinnacle, but that was my goal. That was my North Star. I've always been quite ambitious, but I've always been willing to take those risks and to take that road less travel. Whereas others might have been going, when I came out of business school, others might have been going into consulting, investment banking. And I said, this technology looks quite interesting to me. So I'm always willing to make that right turn.
And I think you also come by it maybe a little bit from your DNA, because your dad was also a pioneer, right? And as I understand it, he hit those roadblocks that you sort of went on to push through. Can you talk a bit about how that helped sort of form your approach to your career and your thinking about what was possible for you?
Yes. My father was an African-American pilot. He was one of two who flew the Air Force, the first supersonic bomber. And he was a pioneer, and it was very difficult, particularly as the Air Force integrated. There aren't that many pilots, and currently there aren't that many pilots, Black pilots today. So he was a pioneer. It took him a while to actually become a pilot. They weren't accepting his application, but he persevered. And that DNA sits with me. In fact, I'll tell you a story because it was so important for my career. When early in my career, my father passed when he was 47. So it was my first year in college. But I went back and I had to take care of some things at my grandmother's house. And I found a speech that he wrote. It was such a treasure map for me, but it was a speech that he wrote talking about the trail to success, where he outlined the 4 C's, culture, concentration, courage, and character. And that has been my roadmap. It's been a way for me to actually make decisions, particularly tough decisions, but also to share the roadmap, because in the simplicity of the 4 C's, it's a great way to have a framework for thinking about your overall career.
Yeah, I know that that's been a real guiding light for you. And there's another C that comes to mind when I think of you. It's confidence. And, that is a place that a lot of us, particularly women, particularly Black women in spaces where we are rare, can stumble, because it's just hard, right? To not be sort of racked by self-doubt, racked by, do I belong, racked by, is this really for me? Can I really do these things? Where did that confidence come from, and how have you managed through those moments where it might have faltered a bit?
Well, I think when you experience grief at a very early age, there's just this natural grit, just this natural resilience. And sometimes you just ask yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen to me? And so having confidence to just build your own narrative. And of course, that imposter syndrome will come in, but I do believe that you can chart your own path, and sometimes it might be difficult. You're going to take risks, you're going to make mistakes, and it's okay. And I have always just kept this inner confidence because I knew that I had experienced tragedy early in my career, and I had overcome it. And so I just said, I am going to be an exemplary leader. I'm going to lead people the way I would like to be led, and I'm going to ascend to the top. And you do attract. What's great is you start to attract allies and sponsors. It's not something that you can do by yourself, but as others gravitate toward you and provide that level of assistance, there's a deep seated gratitude. And I think with gratitude, that also builds confidence. And I've always known that I'm a pioneer and that I will be a role model. And so I try to bring as much confidence with me, even when I'm not feeling as confident as I should be. I do. I'm a lifelong learner, and so I have no problem making mistakes.
You know, it's funny to hear you say that when you experience grief at an early age, it creates a resiliency, right? A natural resiliency and grit. Like, if I can get through this at this stage of my life, you were a freshman in college when your father suddenly died, I can get through anything. But the truth of the matter is, not everyone responds the way you did, right? Some people don't just get up. Some people aren't as resilient. And I think particularly now, when we're all experiencing waves of uncertainty and anxiety, you know, in the midst of this pandemic, I know that all of those things that you have gathered through the years come into play, but how do you illuminate for others, particularly now as you lead in this environment? How do you illuminate for others when they are faltering, particularly now in times like this, right? Like, what's ahead and how long is this going to last? And how do I make a transition in the midst of a time when so much is just beyond my grasp? What do you draw upon to lead people through this period, to lead your team and help give them a sense of optimism and resiliency, you know, some of that resiliency that you have?
It's interesting you ask that, because one of the things that I've done throughout my career is to study leadership. I think sometimes people think about their domain expertise, but leadership is also a skill, and it's something that you have to spend time studying other leaders, learning. And so one of my favorites is Nelson Mandela. So, you know, obviously, you know, his career and being in different situations, but he talks about just leading, and I call it leading from all sides. So you have to know as a leader when you need to step out front and provide that protection, provide that vision and clarity of purpose for your team. I also know when you need to step behind, because you don't want to micromanage. You have stars, rising stars, so you want to actually, you know, propel them to the front and really support them. And then there's what I call leading from the side, where you actually need to go right there with people so that you're coaching them every step of the way. And so I think where we are right now, in terms of leading through this crisis, this is a time where you have to lead from the front. You need to make sure you have clarity of vision. You need to absolutely know how to prioritize, because there will be way too much on people's plates, and you have to be able to prioritize from a business perspective. We support many partners, those in industries that are challenged, and some are looking for new opportunities. We need to make sure we're there for them and that we are very helpful, because in fact, we understand technology. And so I don't shy away from it. I've been at Google for over 14 years. I had the first Great Recession, and that was an opportunity, quite frankly, to showcase to our customers at the time the efficiency of digital, because that was right, toward the beginning of the digital transformation, as well as the efficacy of the technology. So in many cases, you don't want to waste a crisis. You do want to make sure that you are looking at potential new business models, how you could pivot in different directions. But at the same time, that's where you have to bring your grit. You need to bring your resilience, but you need to also put on your oxygen mask and make sure you are taking care of yourself first. Yeah. And at the same time, then you step in front, and you step in front with vision, clarity, and extreme prioritization.
You talk about pivoting and not wasting a crisis, and Lord knows you're not, because you've just become an author for the first time. So your book, A Blessing, Women of Color Teaming Up to Lead, Power, and Thrive, let me get it out of the light so people can see, is available now. Order it on Amazon or anywhere you get your books. Why did you decide to become an author at this stage in your career? Was this something you always wanted to do?
No, actually, it was an idea. I felt as though there should be a new narrative for women of color. And Jackie Adams, who is my co-author, I said, why not team up to do this? And so she is a former CBS White House correspondent, also a fellow Harvard Business School alum. And we just started 2 years ago to create this new narrative. In many cases, it was legacy, but also it's mission driven, because we do think the timing is right for a new narrative. And then we started 2 years ago. We also created a data-driven mission, in the sense that we surveyed over 4,005 women across 4 races, and that's Black, White, Asian, Latinx. And then we also went across 4 generations, and so that was Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, as well as Boomers. And so the data itself was quite illuminating. And so in addition to the mission-driven, it was an opportunity for us to create this new rallying cry around teaming up. And here we are. We started 2 years ago, but here we are right now in the middle of the conversation. Everything that has happened, whether it's with the pandemic, as well as with the racial injustice that we've experienced yet again, it's opening up a new narrative within business. And so what we've seen is, this is a leadership book, and we are talking to women of color. At the same time, we are talking to leaders, because we think this is an opportunity to expand upon inclusive leadership as well as allyship within our message.
So why A Blessing? Why is this the title of the book? I know that, that's always something to drill down on, right? And sometimes a book begins with this title that just conceptualizes exactly what it is. So I think it hits interesting notes. You're calling it a blessing, as opposed to many other ways that you could have gone. I know that one of the things you reference in here is the fact that women of color, particularly in tech, are unicorns, and this notion of the unicorn. Honestly, it's something that I grapple with, because I want us to team up and to embrace all that we can be, but unicorns are mythical, right? They just don't exist. So I want us to feel like, this is doable, this is real, and there should be so many of us that it's just not at all a rarity anymore. So how did you sort of deal with those sometimes conflicting notions?
Yes. So thank you for asking that question, because what we found is that when you think about a flock of birds or parade of giraffe, a gathering of unicorns is a blessing. And so as we were doing our research, we found here, can you imagine, in 2020, 47% of Black women are frequently or always the only person of their race in a professional situation. So that should be mythical, quite frankly. And in contrast, rarely, 73% of white women are rarely the only person of their race. And so in many respects, we wanted to tell, women of color, you are a blessing. But we had also a dual message to say, why should the only exist today? There's so much untapped talent.
Right.
Women of color are going to be the majority by 2060. We, Black women, are the most educated group within the United States. The Black entrepreneurship for women has grown 164%. I mean, the stats go on and on. We're winning. Yeah. And so we even have a candidate, for with Kamala Harris being, the vice president. And so we continue to win. And so the notion is, let's take away the only and move into hiring multiples. And there's such an extreme ROI for businesses to create this environment of belonging. So quite frankly, we shouldn't have unicorns coming together to gather, but only to gather, to assemble, quite frankly, their abundance of talent, their brilliance, and their power to be able to have an impact on society by illuminating the fact that there shouldn't be one of anything. There should always be multiples. And if we can have multiples, whether it's in companies and in growing businesses, in venture capital, I mean, you name it, it will just be a better world for everyone.
Yeah, but this is the conundrum, right? And it just goes on and on and on. On the one hand, we're winning. We are graduating at higher rates and higher levels than at any time in history and surpassing most groups, right? On the other hand, there's the we are winning in spite of, or in spite of the fact that we're winning X, right? We are still a rarity, or we're not getting hired, or we're still unicorns, or we're entrepreneurs more than anyone, but we are just underfunded and scrambling, for pennies at the bottom of the trickle down from everybody else all the time. So, given how long you have been doing this and working so hard to create this change in narrative and this sea change in the reality for Black women in particular, in business and technology, why do you think that there are all the in spite ofs? Why is there still this incredible resistance to progress and to embracing us in particular?
Well, I will say in our data, it was quite illuminating when you look at the information by generation. So the Gen Z, so when you start to think about Gen Z, between 16 to 29, right now, that cohort is going to be in the majority by 2027. So that is your millennials and your Gen X Gen Z, that will be part of that majority in 2027. We found in our data that they will expect complete control. They expect their managers and supervisors to be supportive of them. And oh, by the way, retention will be very difficult. So I think the young people, and again, based upon our data, they are a flight risk. They are going to truly carve their own path. And so I think we're starting to see signs of this in terms of new movements that are starting, that are taking hold. But the Gen Z, the expectation and how they have grown up, their expectation is there should be a environment of belonging for them. And so I think you will see them start to chart their own path. And we also found in our research that we are more inclined with Black and Latinx women to be more prone to be the first one to know around technology. So you're going to see, I believe, more innovation, and we are winning, but we do think that our research is showing that there will be a new path, and this should be an awakening for leaders today.
Where do you see the real pathways to success for these coming generations, both based on your data and just based on your experience? I know that for you, sales was a place where you really sort of leveraged a lot of opportunity for yourself. I know you've also talked about the importance of, taking on projects and pathways that others don't want to take on, that seem unappealing, and you've really leveraged those moments. Where do you see sort of the same sorts of opportunities being positive pathways to success for those coming behind you, or do you see new inroads opening that need to be leveraged and recognized more?
Well, I've been a proponent of technology, and as I mentioned, I've taken the road less traveled, but I do think there's two things that people should think about. I would say one is stay close to the money. I think sometimes we veer away from the P&L, and so I do think it's important to have an understanding of the P&L, the top line in terms of revenue growth, but being able to understand and manage cost, manage assets. And so I would say stay close to the P&L, because that opens up so many opportunities, whether it's in your current career for boards, but having that level and breadth of business experience, I think, is going to be extremely important. I think the other is stay close to the technology. In fact, McKinsey highlighted the fact, during this period, e-commerce penetration in the US grew in 10 years. It grew 10 years in 3 months. And so I do, it would tell people that they should think about technology and make sure that they have an understanding of. I'm continuing to learn, even myself, being in technology, I'm very focused right now on studying artificial intelligence, understanding this new algorithmic world and how it is going to impact, all business models. And so I would say those would be the two, is stay close to how the business is run in new models and P&L, and then also understand the future and current underlying and enabling technology.
And on a more fundamental level, in terms of education is changing, right? Very, very rapidly. And the pandemic has opened up, new areas of concern that will become, no doubt, potential areas of transformation in education. You have the benefits of Howard University undergrad, HBCU heaven, and Harvard Business School, Ivy League Business School heaven. I'm curious to know how each of those institutions helped shape you. What did you get from one that you couldn't have gotten from the other, and vice versa? And what do you see the educational path being that would be so critical for young people going forward, wanting to follow your path?
Yeah, so that's another great question, Caroline. In terms of Howard, I'm from Denver. That's where I spent my formative years. And so going to Howard for me it is, as they say, the Mecca. Going to Howard and seeing everything that was happening across every single discipline, just incredible Black brilliance and excellence in each and every way. I think the professors were always very close in terms of help aiding your development. And so at Howard, I was able to see right in plain view all the doctors, architects, artists, as well as journalists, business. I mean, you name it, it was all there. It was such an opportunity. So when we talked about confidence earlier, that's where I actually built my confidence. Yeah. Is to say, oh no, yes, we can accomplish this. I can accomplish this. And then going on to Harvard Business School, again, it added to my leadership. Being able to attend HBS was something that I was told, if you're going to apply to business school, just apply to the top. And so that's what I did. And And so it's just been an incredible combination, particularly as a leader, because I do feel, and perhaps unlike others, I can lead everyone because I've placed myself in different environments. It's one of my father's four C's, just being able to understand what's been called, we're calling cultural intelligence, we've coined the phrase generational diversity, but really being able to have confidence and being able to have the tools. From a leadership perspective, I think it has served me well. I would say from an educational perspective, I am pretty adamant about STEM. I think, there should be more of our community in STEM. It's one of the reasons why I founded, along with Dr. Frederick, Howard West, so that we could have an immersive experience. So it wasn't just, yes, we would have some of our colleagues work with the faculty at HBCUs, but no, let's actually bring the students, show them, why don't they live in Silicon Valley and spend some time there? And there was such an overwhelming response from Google to surround the students. We've now expanded the program to over 10 plus colleges and universities. And so I would say that STEM, staying close to technology, and not just technology from a computer science and engineering perspective, but also from a business perspective. So I won't veer from that because I do think there should be more of us who have an understanding of technology. And I think it will be an area, and I've seen the arc of technology over many different entry points, whether it was the personal computer to what we're seeing now across mobile, across video, across search, and across what we're seeing in data science as well.
You talk about the arc of technology. You've had such an extraordinary career in corporate America and in tech, and now you're an author as well. What about your arc, your own personal arc? What's the ultimate goal for you? What's left that you haven't done?
Well, I will say that my ultimate arc was to be an exemplary leader. I mean, that's what I think is important. And I will always take the road less traveled, so I'm out there looking, what is that new horizon? And so that's why, as I mentioned, looking at AI, I think looking at personal investing, understanding new industries. So I have my eye open, and it's, as I said, I'm sticking with technology because I do think it is an enabler for our society. It's an enabler for individuals. It's an enabler for companies. But I do think that Google, I'm on the venture with them, and I think my story isn't finished.
You've been an investor, you've been an entrepreneur, you've been a corporate executive. I know that you mentor a lot of younger people. When you look out now, both at your career and where you still want to go, and at these people coming into the industry, young Black people in particular and women, if they came to you and said, I want to really just choose a path, right? One path. What do you think is the best path to go? Should I just become an entrepreneur? Should I do the corporate route? Or ultimately, should I look to invest in, startups or get hooked up with startups so that I can, grow my wealth that way? Because there is this wealth imperative, right? We continue to have this just intensively resistant generational wealth gap. So we often talk about careers without really directly connecting the two. But young people are much more sort of attuned connecting those dots, right? So when they come to you now and say, if you were starting out right now, which way would you go?
Well, first of all, I believe in the zigzag. I don't think anything should be linear. I think you have to expand your risk profile, because if you don't go to the edge and try something, and quite frankly, if you're not making mistakes, you're not at the edge. And so you won't know your superpower, your strengths, will all have, development areas, but you need to know what they are. And so with the zigzag, so yes, I've done, had co-founded 2 companies, have made different career pivots along the way, but I do think I do it for skills. And so by gathering skills, I do think that is something that allows you to opens new opportunities, quite frankly. And so I believe you shouldn't take a linear path. And again, this is my personal view, but I do think you should test your risk profile. And you say, when you talk about generational wealth, it's taking those risks. And some of them are not going to pan out, quite frankly, but it's taking the risk. So in 2006, people would have said you had a great job. Why are you leaving the automotive? Just sit there, maybe ascend a bit higher. But no, when Google came calling, I did my due diligence, and I said, in talking to 2 people, my husband, who's my mentor, as well as I spoke to a CTO. And then just one conversation, because I knew I had an affinity for technology, I said, I'm going here. I'm making this move. And so I would just encourage everyone today, find your edge, make a few mistakes along the way, and you'll have greater discovery. And I do think that will lead toward greater satisfaction. And quite frankly, there's an opportunity for wealth generation as well.
That's such great advice. Find your edge and ride it, but don't do it alone, right? Teaming up to empower all of us and move forward. Bonita, thank you so much.
Thank you, Caroline.
Have a wonderful day. Stay
You
safe,
too.
stay well.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.